So thank you again. Thank you for signing on tonight and into this info session that is entitled Navigating the Aging Mind. So welcome. We are blessed to have with us tonight trailblazers. I mean, just wonderful women who are in the field of memory care research from the esteemed University of Chicago. I know that they are going to present information tonight that is guaranteed to both help us and inform us. And tonight we are just in for a treat. I'm excited. I'm excited. Just let me make sure that I alert you again that tonight's info session is recorded. So please keep that in mind when you choose to speak or share something out, that this will be recorded. And we intend to put this on our YouTube channel as well, so others will see this. So, before we get into the meat and potatoes of this virtual event, we need to first pause for the cause. I want to provide you with a brief background about the organization that is hosting this virtual event, and that is Seed2Fruit Education. So, if you don't know by now, my name is Felicia Williams, and I am the founder of Seed2Fruit Education, along with my husband. In our business, we intentionally design products to target the needs of anyone that takes care of someone who has a cognitive impairment, whether they're young, old, or in between. Our goal is to be a hybrid solution for cognitive care. There we go. So, as you can see here, we have a poster of our products, and they are designed and developed to really be assistive technology interventions that do indeed assist with communication, executive functioning, as well as behavior management. They come in the form of handheld visual aids and communication boards that can be used with individuals who have disabilities that relate to cognitive decline or disorder. And they also can be used with any individual at any age or stage of cognitive decline. Our flagship product, known as the Parallel Teaching and Transition Board System, which you will find on the top row of the at the top of the poster, was designed to work with children who are about school age, either early childhood, primary, or secondary, and it's anyone in that age range that may have a cognitive delay due to a language or learning disability or a behavior disorder, or even a combination of all those things in the form of autism spectrum disorder. The PTTBS really feels the need for interventions that are multifunctional, easy to use, and allow teachers in the classroom to pivot whenever they need to. Our most recent offering is called the Senior Care Board System, and that's the product line that's at towards the middle bottom of the poster. And this product was designed and developed out of a personal experience that both my husband and I have had working one-on-one with our own loved ones who have found that were diagnosed with some form of dementia. We found that in this important work that we were doing, that basically when it came to resources for caregivers, especially those who do this work from home, there's basically non-existent, and I have dubbed that as being a memory care desert. So this is a situation where we barely have resources out there, despite the vast, even millions of individuals who are not only diagnosed with dementia or Alzheimer's, but also the millions and millions of families that have to support them. So my husband and I received divine inspiration to retrofit our flagship product, which was the PTTBS, and make it into something that allows anyone that has dementia, anyone that is working with someone that has dementia. It allows the person who has the diagnosis, it gives them agency, it gives them independence, or at least a sense of it, while allowing the caregiver to provide structure and organization around that support. So, our final thing I would like to say about our business is that we are definitely service driven, service oriented, and we really want our customers to be supplied with what I refer to as wraparound services that support their needs, that their wants, or things that they just need access to. And this includes training modules for our product line, both in person and on demand. We have formed support groups for caregivers. We are building a resource network so that we can connect our clients or our customers with things that they need, events, both in person and virtual, and informational sessions like the one you're in today or tonight. So, if anyone wants information regarding who we are and what we do, or if you're curious more, want to learn more about our products, I will put our contact information in the chat, and you can make sure that you contact us, and we will see how to help you best. So, with that said, let's turn our attention to our agenda tonight. So, we've already opened in prayer. I've welcomed. We will get into the introductions momentarily. Our our first presenter will be Dr. Chandler Zolliecoffer, and after that, we will have Q&A, and then we will hear from Phyllis Timpo and Sheila Nicholes. And I put down there that she is a super ager. So we will learn more about that in a little bit, but I just want you to know we're in for a treat. After she speaks, we'll have another Q&A session, and then we will talk about some new resources that are made available not only through my network, but also through the University of Chicago. We'll have some final remarks and close in prayer. At this time, before I introduce our first speaker, I really would like for you to hold your questions. We have a limited time that we're going to be together tonight, so I just don't want to break the flow of the speakers. So if you have a burning question, put it in the chat or write it down, and during the time of Q&A, we will address it then. Okay? So before I get into the main introduction for Dr. Zolliecoffer, I want to just mention this because it's very much worth mentioning. Let me just say that it is so very refreshing seeing women of color doing their thing at the highest level at prestigious facilities and institutions. Now, don't get me wrong, I appreciate all of God's children. I love the gifts and talents that come out of anyone that any gender, culture, age, it doesn't make a difference. But there is just something so special about when you see somebody come from your community and break through and break out and just do things at the highest level. It's hitting a very sweet spot in my soul. So I am just having an extra lift tonight to see all of these beautiful women of color just doing their thing. I can't say more than that. So thank you for joining us tonight. With that said, our first speaker is the illustrious, credentialed, and skilled, fabulous Chandler J. Zolliecoffer. She has earned her PhD and is a clinical psychologist and she is also a postdoctorate fellow with the University of Chicago Medicine. At the HAARC Center, Dr. Chandler provides neuropsychological consultation for the U of Chicago SuperAging study and contributes to the community engagement initiatives and recruitment efforts. I will stop there and I will allow Dr. Zolliecoffer to go more in depth with her biography and her experience. So let's all turn our attention to Dr. Zolliecoffer and just expect to hear some wonderful things.
Well, thank you so much, Felicia and Ricardo. Really appreciate you all inviting us here. We are really excited to speak with you and your group today. Thank you for the warm introduction. I know that Phyllis and I are equally excited to see a Black couple being in this space and doing this work. It means a lot to our community. And so this is why we do this, right? To inform our community. So we're really excited to be doing this. And yes, so I'm excited to talk with you all today about aging, dementia, and cognitive impairment, in addition to healthy strategies that we can look for to ensuring that our brain remains healthy in the long term. All right, so I've got a presentation that I'm going to share now. Okay, let's see. Is my screen sharing?
Yep.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Thank you all. Okay, so the title of the presentation is called Navigating the Aging Mind, Distinguishing Normal Cognitive Aging from Dementia. So we're going to talk about the differences between those things. All right, here's a little bit of a biography. I'm not going to go too much in depth into it. But as Felicia said, I'm a clinical neuropsychologist. I need to update the bio on the HAARC Center page because I've actually just graduated with from my fellowship at the University of Chicago, and so now I am entering into a faculty position at the University of Chicago. I'm staying on, and I'm excited to continue to see patients and to continue to do research with Phyllis and Dr. Rogowski at the HAARC Center. And so my interests in general are aging and dementia, but particularly looking at folks of color, in specific, looking at Black individuals and how aging impacts them, both on the superaging front and also the dementia front. Okay, so this is what our time together will look like. So I'm going to be talking first about the brain and thinking skills or cognition. We'll talk about what normal cognitive aging looks like. So what does it look like to age and to continue to move forward in life as you age, and what that looks like from a brain perspective and a thinking perspective. And then we'll also talk about when thinking skills start to decline, so cognitive dysfunction, mild cognitive impairment, and the difference between that and dementia. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we'll talk also about maintaining your brain health. So how can we ensure that our thinking skills stay sharp, right, as we continue to age, and I'll provide some resources as well. All right, and so before we jump in, let's first get oriented and kind of situated to the brain. So there are 5 distinct lobes of the brain. So we've got our frontal lobes. This is what's in orange here. This area of the brain controls a lot of our decision-making skills and what we decide to do, right? Our green lobe here, called the parietal lobes, these lobes help control our visual spatial skills and how we move in time and space. Our orange lobes here, the occipital lobes in the back of the brain, the red lobes here in the back of the brain, occipital lobes, these control our vision more specifically. The temporal lobes here are really important because they control our learning and memory skills. And so we'll spend a lot of time talking about learning and memory today, and what it looks like to age normally and what it looks like when there's some declines in our learning and memory skills. And then this yellow lobe here is our cerebellum, and that controls things like our motor functioning. All right. So now that we're oriented to what the brain structure looks like, let's talk a little bit more about some of the thinking skills or cognitive functions that we have. So our cognitive functions represent the building blocks for learning, processing, understanding, and communicating information. There are a number of different cognitive functions, including attention and processing speed, like complex attention. We have our language skills. If you recall from this screen here, our temporal lobes not only house our learning and memory, but a lot of times it houses our language functions as well. Particular aspects of language called semantic language, or how we make meaning of information. We also have what's called executive functioning. And so that's that decision-making skills, problem solving and reasoning. Those are what's in the frontal lobes of the brain. We also have cognitive functions like perceptual reasoning and motor skills, as we discussed earlier. And finally, we have skills like social cognition, which is how do you interact with others in a social way? Are you acting appropriately in social settings? Those sorts of things. And learning and memory, right? Okay. I think I see something in the chat here. Do I have a question? I actually can't see it, but if someone, if it's pertinent at the moment, feel free to
I'll take a look at the chat.
Thank you. Okay. All right. So let's talk about normal cognitive aging, right? So just as our physical bodies age, so do our brains. As such, as we age, some degree of cognitive change is to be expected. There are some normal symptoms of aging, and these can include things like occasional lapses in attention or occasional forgetfulness, occasional memory problems, right? These changes don't result in significant decline in your daily functioning, though. So just because someone has an occasional attentional lapse, right? They occasionally aren't paying attention super closely in a conversation with someone, or maybe they misplace their keys, right? And this happens infrequently. That doesn't mean that they automatically have dementia or that they automatically have any kind of condition that falls under dementia, like Alzheimer's disease or Parkinson's disease. And we'll talk about some of the different, the specific types of dementia moving forward. But I just want to impress upon you all that it is completely normal to occasionally forget things sometimes, right? And it's completely normal to occasionally not pay attention to things at times. And by a show of hands or by folks putting things in the chat, who here has misplaced their glasses or their keys or their wallet, right? Me too. Absolutely. And so just to remind ourselves that at the first sign that you do one of those things, don't panic, right? Instead, we want you to start just paying attention to those sorts. See if it happens on a regular basis and really see if you find it later on, right? Because that's what's important. Are you finding the things that you're misplacing, or is this becoming more of a pattern? And we'll talk about what happens when it starts to become a pattern, okay? All right, so normal cognitive aging, really just occasional lapses in thinking. And this is quite normal. Okay. Next, we'll talk about mild cognitive impairment, or MCI. So when cognitive changes exceed what is expected in normal aging, right? So I told you all before that it's normal for us to have occasional lapses, but when we start thinking about and we start to notice that these things are happening more frequently, that's when we can start talking to our doctors. And they might then run some tests and give us some cognitive evaluations to see, is this normal or is this more than normal? So there's kind of two different branches of not normal. So we've got normal aging on one side, and then we have what's not normal on the other side. The two branches include mild cognitive impairment and major cognitive impairment. The synonym for major cognitive impairment is dementia, okay? So mild cognitive impairment is more of, it's kind of approaching, it's not quite dementia, but we are noticing that some things are changing here, right? So some common symptoms can look similar to normal aging. However, you might begin to notice that these symptoms happen more frequently, and you need to rely more heavily on strategies, right? In order for you to complete certain tasks. Like maybe you're relying more heavily now on your GPS when, as before, you were able to navigate your neighborhood and going to the store without relying on your GPS. You can still get there, but maybe you're relying on things like strategies that you hadn't relied on previously, right? You might also notice that you're relying more heavily on making notes, right? Or using calendars and lists and reminders. It's normal to use those occasionally, but if you're noticing that this is happening more frequently, then that's when we start to pay more attention to it, okay? And this is really to complete some of our major tasks, things like driving, paying our bills. Let's see, what are some other pieces? Taking our medication, those sorts of things, our activities of daily living, our instrumental activities of daily living, things that you need to be able to do to live independently, right? Okay, so that's mild cognitive impairment. Next, we have major cognitive impairment or dementia, right? So you all recall we have the normal aging on the left side, one camp. On our other camp, we have mild cognitive impairment and major cognitive impairment or dementia. These are synonyms. In doctor settings, you might hear either of these. And so it's important to know that they mean the same thing. Major cognitive impairment and dementia are the same. So major cognitive impairment or dementia is an umbrella term that encompasses many different types of neurologic and neurodegenerative diseases that result in major cognitive impairment and significant decline in someone's higher level functions. So you're seeing decline in someone's ability to take care of themselves independently. So someone who has dementia is no longer able to accurately and reliably do things like take their medication or drive. You might see someone with dementia getting lost, right, all the time when they're driving, or even in their neighborhood going for walks, right? Someone with dementia might also have trouble paying their finances. In a lot of cases, I've seen patients will pay their bills multiple times because they've forgotten that they've already paid their bill, right? And so these are the kinds of things that we want to look out for when someone is exhibiting significant cognitive impairment, okay? So these are cognitive lapses that occur on a regular basis. This is happening nearly almost every day. You're noticing some problems with their thinking skills. So they're relying now not only on things like reminders and lists, but now they're relying more heavily on other people, right, in order to be able to take care of themselves. And really, without the help of others, they wouldn't be able necessarily to do the things that they had done previously independently, okay? And it's important to note with that, with dementia, someone's thinking skills oftentimes do decline over time. But what's important to realize is that everyone is different. So you don't always see that decline. The decline doesn't happen on a day-to-day basis. It's over a period of years, oftentimes, right? And we don't know how long someone might have dementia. Some might have dementia for 10 years, 10 plus years, right? It all really depends on the type of dementia and the person, that person's medical history and those sorts of things, okay? So that's kind of a broad picture of normal aging, mild cognitive impairment, and dementia. So now let's look more closely at different types of dementia. So we talked earlier about how dementia is an umbrella term. And what that means is that it encompasses lots of different types of conditions. So dementia is kind of the broad category. You can think of it as an umbrella. And then under the umbrella are different kinds of dementia. So one that we hear a lot about is Alzheimer's disease. Alzheimer's disease is a specific type of dementia, one where it impacts someone's memory, so their thinking skills are impacted, their ability to remember information is impacted, and it also starts to impact other thinking skills down the line too. Things like their language skills can start to decline, where they're not able to come up with the words that they remembered in the past, right? They might have trouble paying attention as often as well as they did in the past. And they might also have some trouble with their speed of thinking. So they might be slower to respond, or it might take them longer to think of what they want to say, right? So that's Alzheimer's disease. You might see things where folks repeat themselves. They might repeat stories. Someone might share a story and then within a few minutes they repeat that same story, right? So that's what Alzheimer's disease can look like. Vascular dementia is a different type of dementia. This one is caused by reduced blood flow to the brain, leading to cognitive decline or cognitive impairment. So this one is heavily related to our medical conditions, things like diabetes, right? High blood sugar or high blood pressure, cardiovascular disease, right? When we hear that term, cardiovascular, that's relating to our heart oftentimes. That's what we think of when we think of vascular dementia. So our ability to maintain and regulate our physical bodies, so our heart health, greatly impacts our brain health too. And so what's good for your heart, we'll talk a little bit later about, is also good for the brain. So things like diet and exercise, those are really good for your heart, your physical body. They're also really good for your brain. And to help reduce the risk of you developing something like a vascular dementia. So we really want to take care of our medical conditions so that we reduce our risk of developing vascular dementia. Another type of dementia is Lewy body dementia. And this one is oftentimes characterized by fluctuations in someone's alertness, so their ability to kind of stay alert, their attention can be really kind of up in the air, kind of variable. We also tend to see with folks who have Lewy body dementia, they'll have visual hallucinations, right? So they're seeing things that aren't really there. The patient might think that they're there and they experience it as if someone or something is there, but really there is no actual visual input happening. So folks who have Lewy body dementia might see things like little people or little animals, things like that. They often share with us. They also will have problems with sleep a lot of times, and there are specific problems where they're having really vivid dreams. Folks might often have restless leg syndrome, where they're kind of kicking and punching and acting out their dreams too with Lewy body dementia. And this type of dementia is it's related to a motor sort of dementia where there's kind of this physical aspect where they're kind of moving, right, their arms and legs. It's related to, in some respects, Parkinson's disease. It's an atypical Parkinson's disease type of dementia. Another type is called frontotemporal dementia. And so this one is characterized by changes in someone's behavior or their personality. So someone who used to be as sweet as pie might start acting differently. They might start being really frustrating towards other people or kind of mean even, saying things that they wouldn't normally say, saying things that are sexually lewd or cursing and using language that they hadn't used before. Gambling a lot of times can happen with frontotemporal dementia. And so it's a complete personality shift, but it's not the person's fault. It's because of changes in their brain that are making this happen. And so this one tends to happen early on, and more early on than some of our other dementia types. So, for example, in Alzheimer's disease, this often happens in folks who are, if someone is going to develop Alzheimer's, it wouldn't be likely until they're 65 or older. That's not to say that everyone who is 65 and older will go on to develop Alzheimer's disease. I want to be clear about that. But with folks who have frontotemporal dementia, this can happen as early as someone's 50s. So it's an earlier onset dementia. Okay. So these are just a few different types of dementias. It's not an exhaustive list, but these are ones that are fairly common and we see fairly regularly in our clinics. Okay, so I'm going to spend some time talking about Alzheimer's disease in particular because Alzheimer's disease is the most common type of dementia. And it's one that folks are are oftentimes familiar with and they hear about, right? So I'm curious from our group, has anyone been impacted not only maybe by Alzheimer's disease, but dementia in general? And by impacted, I mean have a family member, a friend, anyone, right, that they know of who might have dementia. Yeah, yeah. Me too. And so it's really common, right? So as I noted earlier, some of the early symptoms of Alzheimer's disease include things like memory changes. That's usually the first symptom of Alzheimer's disease is someone will have problems remembering things like recent events. They might not remember that they had recently gone to the movies, right? And they might then go again, or they might start telling someone a story of how they maybe went to the movies, and then they repeat that story again because they've forgotten within a matter of minutes, oftentimes. They might then start having problems with their language, like not being able to name certain things, right? Thinking of, oh, what's that called? What's that called? And that's pretty common, right? I know I've certainly said, oh, I can't remember the name of that thing. But in folks who have Alzheimer's disease, this happens on a regular basis, right? This is happening multiple times a day, usually every day, okay? People who have Alzheimer's disease are oftentimes misplacing items, getting lost, and not then remembering or not remembering ultimately, even if you or I have lost something, we can typically find it over the course of a few days or the day, right? Folks with Alzheimer's disease tend not to find those things that they've lost. And they often are getting lost, right, themselves in their neighborhood or in an unfamiliar setting, and even in familiar settings, and then oftentimes calling folks like their children or a loved one, their husband or wife, right, to be able to help them navigate back home. All right. So some of the later symptoms of Alzheimer's disease include things like confusion, disorientation, communication problems, those sorts of things. Okay. Okay, so this is a sheet that I like to include because we talked about, is this normal? Is it normal aging or is it not? Is this something that I should talk about with my doctor, right? So how can we tell the difference between these two things? So how can you tell the difference between mild forgetfulness and a serious memory problem like Alzheimer's? Well, we want to see what's typical and what's not. For folks who have, if it's normal aging, then someone might make a bad decision every once in a while, right? It's not a daily thing, it's not a regular occurrence. Whereas someone with Alzheimer's disease, they're making poor judgments and decisions a lot of the times. So it's more of that pattern, right? Someone who is missing a monthly payment, right? Maybe their cell phone bill is due and they're missing that payment. This is fairly normal, right? We might all miss a payment or miss a credit card payment every once in a while. But someone with Alzheimer's disease isn't regularly taking care of the bills on a monthly basis, right? So this is happening every time the bill comes up. They're not paying it, or they're letting the mail pile up, right? They're not thinking about it, or they've forgotten about it. All right. What's normal is forgetting what day it is and remembering later on, right? So maybe you think, oh, I think today is Tuesday, when in reality, it's Wednesday, right? And someone with Alzheimer's disease might say, well, they might lose track of the date or time of the year on a regular basis, right? They might think instead of 2025, they might think that it's 2005, right? So those kinds of errors. Someone who is forgetting which word to use, that might happen to everyone, right? That happens to everyone. But someone with Alzheimer's disease might have trouble maintaining a conversation with someone. So they might shy away then from even talking because they can't come up with the words that they want to use at all. Whereas you or I, we might just substitute that word, right? We might substitute it for something else. Someone with Alzheimer's disease might not be able to come up with any word to replace the word that they had forgotten. And someone who is having typical normal aging, they might lose things from time to time, right? Again, misplacing our wallet or phone or our glasses on occasion, whereas someone with Alzheimer's disease might misplace things often and be then unable to find them later on. So if you're starting to notice that things are happening on a regular basis, these kinds of problems are happening on a regular basis for you or your loved one or someone that you care about, that's when it's time to talk to a doctor, okay? And so you can just talk with your doctor and share what's going on, just as we would go to our doctor for a regular physical checkup and say, my bones are starting to feel a little painful. I'm starting to have some problems, feeling like maybe I have some arthritis, things like that. We can also talk to our doctor about our thinking skills and our thinking changes. And so if you are noticing that, then you can talk to your doctor about it. Okay, we'll speak now a little bit more in depth about vascular dementia, as this is another common type of dementia. So vascular dementia alone accounts for 5 to 10% of all dementia cases. And one thing I want to share is that even if someone doesn't have full-blown vascular dementia, they might have vascular disease or cerebrovascular disease, which is, again, these white matter changes that happen in someone's brain that are related to things like our medical conditions, like our blood pressure being too high, or our blood sugar being too high, or our cholesterol being too high, those sorts of things. And when it gets to having too much of those white matter changes in the brain, that's when it starts to become a problem. And that's when it can develop into dementia, right? And so we want to make sure that we are taking care our physical selves so that we can reduce the risk of having that buildup of white matter disease changes in our brain. And so symptoms that are often related to vascular dementia, they also include things like memory and learning and memory problems, but these are oftentimes different than what's observed in folks who have Alzheimer's disease in terms of their memory problems. So someone with Alzheimer's disease, if you give them a hint or a clue and say, oh, remember, we went to the train station and it was on a Wednesday. Can you fill in the rest of the story? They really won't be able to fill in the rest of that story. But for someone who has vascular dementia, if you say, we went to the train station, it was on a Wednesday, that person will usually be able to pick up on the context clues, and that jogs their memory enough to then say, that's right, we went to the train station on Wednesday so that we could go from Chicago to Milwaukee, right? And that tends to help jog their memory. So they're aided by clues and context. Whereas folks who have Alzheimer's disease, even if you give them hints and clues, it really doesn't jog their memory because they had trouble learning that information, taking that information in the beginning, in the first place. Folks who have vascular dementia also have some changes in things like executive functioning, which we talked about earlier, which is things like decision making. It might be harder for them to make decisions, and it might be harder for them to do things like plan and organize. So their homes might be kind of in disarray, right? They're having trouble staying organized. They're having trouble planning their day. They're forgetting a lot. But then when you remind them again, they tend to remember and say, oh yeah, that's right. I was supposed to go to the post office today, right? And I did have that mail kind of piling up. They might also have some declines in their speed of thinking. So they might have, it might take them a little bit longer to process information as before. Okay, so we're going to shift gears here and now talk a little bit more about Alzheimer's disease facts and figures. We talked earlier today about how it's really important that we are doing these kinds of talks, right? So that our community, Black community, folks of color are able to appreciate and understand the kinds of thinking changes that might happen so that we can then be proactive about it. And so I just wanted to share some information with you all that really kind of talks about our community, right? So we discussed before that Alzheimer's disease is the most common type of dementia, and 10% of people aged 65 and older are living with Alzheimer's disease. So that's a good chunk of the population, right? So we want to be aware of what Alzheimer's disease symptoms look like. Some even more staggering facts are the fact that Black individuals are 1.5 to 2.5 times more likely to develop Alzheimer's disease than non-Hispanic white individuals, right? So we as Black individuals are more likely to develop Alzheimer's disease than our white counterparts. That's a huge number, right? If we're twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease than our white counterparts, we want to know why that is. We want to know what we can do about that. How can we change that, right? And so we'll discuss further in some of the research aspects of this, and Phyllis will talk more about this too, what we can do to help reduce that risk. Okay. So an even more staggering fact is that Black women are at even greater risk of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. So not only are Black individuals in general at 2 times risk, Black women in particular are at even higher risk, right, of developing Alzheimer's disease. So let's talk now about why that might be, right? Okay. So let's see. Let's move actually to this point here. Okay. So research suggests that the historic and continued marginalization of Black and Hispanic individuals in the United States has produced disparities between older Black and Hispanic populations compared to older white populations in life experiences, socioeconomic indicators, and ultimately in their health conditions. And it's these disparities that are most likely explaining the difference in risk between who goes on to develop Alzheimer's disease at higher rates than others. So I have this graphic to kind of help break this down for us, where we're seeing that if there are social inequities, right, things like racism, sexism, misogynoir, those sorts of things are impacting. You see that there's this bidirectional arrow here that impacts, really, I guess I should be talking about here, racial risk factors, right? Social disparities, right? Racism, sexism, those sorts of things impact societal inequities, right? If we're exposed to racism, sexism, microaggressions, these sorts of things, then at greater risks than other people, we're going to have disparities between our ability to have social capital and progress, right? And many times and have access to certain things like quality healthcare, right? If folks are being discriminated against and this limits their futures, right? Then that certainly impacts their ability to kind of be upwardly mobile and gain access to settings. So these are all things that are by design in terms of white supremacy, right? And so we want to make sure that we are doing things to educate ourselves so that we know that we can mitigate some of these risks, because these things have an impact on this ADRD means Alzheimer's disease and related dementia. Incidence means the number of new cases. And so the number of new cases of Alzheimer's disease and related dementias are impacted by racial risk factors and by social inequities, right? So I'll just read the kind of caption here and saying this is a study by Finley and colleagues 2023. It's saying multiple factors contribute to our increased risk of new cases of Alzheimer's disease in Black women. So social inequities and discrimination drive things like chronic stress, inhibit access to high quality healthcare for patient populations that look like us, right? And over time, this can have serious biological and health implications for our patients, placing them at even elevated risk for modifiable, meaning changeable, diseases associated with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. And by modifiable diseases, what they're talking about are things like high blood pressure, high cholesterol. These are things we can change, right? Those sorts of things are things we can change. But having those kinds of conditions increases our risk for Alzheimer's disease. And so it's important that we're aware of these kinds of things so that we can really be mindful about how we take care of ourselves, right? As Black women, that's, I think, a really important thing. We have a lot of burden and onus placed on us oftentimes. And so we can be dealing with a lot of stress. So we need to make sure that we are honoring ourselves and our bodies and are able to find stress relief so that we can reduce our risk of developing these diseases moving forward. Okay, so that's a nice transition into how do we manage and maintain our brain health moving forward, right? So these are all different factors that we can focus on in order to reduce our risk of developing chronic conditions and neurodegenerative conditions like Alzheimer's disease. So maintaining things like our diet, right? So ensuring that we are getting pursuing a healthy diet, things like the Mediterranean diet, which includes things like healthy fats like avocados, fish oils, those sorts of things, ensuring that we are eating our fruits and vegetables on a regular basis, ensuring that we are following things like or eating things like fish, right? Salmon and those sorts of things are really helpful for our bodies and then ultimately our brains. Exercise. So I've said it before, what's good for your heart is also good for your brain. And so ensuring that we are not only eating right, but also moving and exercising. It doesn't have to be you're going to the track and running laps if that's not something that you're interested in. Instead, if you're interested in something like water aerobics, right? Going to the pool and doing those sorts of things. Chair yoga can be really helpful. Going to our local YMCAs and signing up for classes, right? These are things that are important. If you're not able to get out of your home, doing things like, the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic has in many ways been very isolating, but in some ways it has opened up our world to the internet and being able to really rely on being connected in ways or through ways like FaceTime and on YouTube, and we're able to access things like that, right? So doing a YouTube search and searching for Pilates exercises and doing those sorts of things at home, right? Sleep is a really big one. So ensuring that we're getting adequate sleep is really important. And there's often a misconception that folks who are seniors are require less sleep, but that's not actually the case. Instead, we need to be ensuring that our seniors, our older adults, are getting adequate sleep. And so I'll have to refresh myself on the actual senior recommendation, but it should be at least 6 hours, right? 6 to 10 hours, 6 to 8 hours are oftentimes recommended for folks, for adults in general. And of course, medical management, as I've discussed previously. So ensuring that we are staying on top of going to the doctor to make sure that our health, our physical health is well taken care of. We want to make sure that we're staying on top of all of our cardiovascular health, as I previously said, but also our mental health. And I think that's going to be on the next slide. So making sure that we are staying emotionally well, right? So doing things like checking in with others and having others check in on us to ensure that we are happy and well. And if we're not, finding people that we can talk to about that, like a therapist or a counselor or a pastor, right? Finding folks who are going to be in our community and who can have a listening ear, right? It can even be a friend or a family member. Maintaining social connection is also really important. And so I talked previously about how the pandemic in many ways made us more socially isolated. But in some ways, we've found alternatives to being connected still, finding ways to get on Zoom, right? We're doing that right now, even, and finding ways to build community where previously we might not have even thought of doing something like this. And it had to be in person, but now we can stay connected despite many of us living in different areas, right? So doing these kinds of things, and then of course keeping your mind active. That doesn't mean that you have to be, completing the New York Times' hardest crossword puzzle, but you can find apps on your phone that you're already using, if so, or going on things like or using things like newspapers, right? Doing crosswords or word searches or Wordle, like those sorts of things. Just keep your mind active and engaged, and it doesn't have to be the hardest thing. And you really should be doing things that you like. That's what I like to emphasize to my patients is don't do something that's gonna frustrate you and gonna make you upset and then you don't want to do it anymore. Instead, do things that are fun, right? Puzzles are things that I like to do. And so finding what makes you happy and also keeps you engaged is really helpful. Okay, just a few more things, and I see my time is nearing the end. So what are the next steps, right? What do we want to ensure what do I want to impress upon you now that we've talked about what dementia is, what mild cognitive impairment is, and what normal aging is, right? So if you're noticing that your thinking skills or your friends' thinking skills, your loved ones' thinking skills, maybe there's starting to be a pattern here. The first step is really to talk to your doctor. Talk to your primary care physician if you have one, right? That can be a nurse practitioner, that can be a physician, that can be, if you don't have a PCP, that can be someone that you trust, right? Like a family member or a friend who can help connect you with a doctor. That doctor will then likely do some tests. And a lot of times that includes things like blood work, like your labs. They might give you a brief cognitive screener, a paper and pencil test to help you to help determine like if there are any kind of glaring items for us to further pursue and further assess. And if your doctor says, yes, I'd like to further investigate that, they might then refer you to a neurologist, which is a brain doctor, who will then run more tests. They might run things like an MRI, which is a brain scan. They might do additional laboratory tests, and then they will often refer you to someone like me, a neuropsychologist. And so, as a neuropsychologist, I'm coming in and I'm looking to see how your brain is functioning and whether you're kind of at the level that I would expect for someone of your age. Or if you're performing above where I would expect for someone of your age or below. And then that'll help us determine if there is something going on, like a medical condition, like a neurodegenerative disease, or if it could be something different, like depression or anxiety could also impact someone's thinking skills, right? So I'm giving paper and pencil tests, so nothing invasive for me. And I'm helping, I'm seeing how you perform on those tests to determine what your thinking skills, where your thinking skills are at. All right. And then finally, just continue to employ those healthy practices that we talked about before, your diet, your exercise, sleep, mental health, staying engaged, being in community, those sorts of things. All right. So I think I'm just at the 40-minute mark, so I tried to time it. But I'm more than willing to answer any questions that folks might have. And here's some resources. I'm happy to send these out to Felicia as well so that she can share them with you all too.
I just want to first say that was phenomenal. Thank you so very much. Um, this is the time for questions. I'm going to mute myself because I have a couple questions, and let some other people ask first. Okay, so now I'm unmuting myself. And I'm gonna go for it.
Yes,
Okay,
please.
so I was really curious because I about what happens in the brain when an individual that well, let me first say that my father has a mixed diagnosis of vascular dementia because he does have diabetes
Mhm.
and onset of Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah.
So, what I find so curious is how sure he is that he can accomplish something, and in a millisecond later, it goes. So, I understand, the outcome of that. But I'm wondering what's going on in the brain that makes them so definitive that they either know how to go somewhere or they know something that they don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So it of course it can vary individual to individual. Broadly speaking, when folks have I'll kind of take it case by case. So folks who have Alzheimer's disease and only a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease, what's going on in the brain is that there is a buildup of amyloid. And so you all might have heard about this misfolded protein called amyloid. And this builds up in the brain over time. It starts early on, really, in folks who are going to go on to develop Alzheimer's disease. It can start as early as someone's 40s. You don't know, you don't ever have the symptoms until someone is in their at least age 65 and older. But this misfolding of proteins causes what we call amyloid plaques. And these plaques then start to deposit into the brain. And so it takes over areas, like I showed everyone in the beginning. For Alzheimer's in particular, it takes over the temporal lobe. That's where it kind of starts. And then ultimately it starts to kind of progress over the entirety of the brain. And so what often is happening is that folks who have Alzheimer's disease, because it starts in the learning and memory center of the brain, folks are having trouble with learning and memory. And then it starts to progress to other parts of the brain, things like processing speed, executive functioning, so planning and reasoning, right? The reasoning skills start to decline as well. And so as someone begins to advance in their dementia, in their Alzheimer's disease in particular, various cognitive changes, cognitive decline starts to become more rampant. It really can vary day to day. And so it's hard to say like why they feel maybe so sure in one moment and less so in another. I think that's really a kind of case by case scenario, but I can tell you that the progression of what these kind of misfolded proteins look like in most people who have Alzheimer's disease. In folks who have vascular dementia, what's happening is that there is less blood is getting to the brain, which means that there's uh, slowed connections is really kind of the best way of putting it. And so processing speed starts to decline. So someone's ability to kind of think through things quickly. They might feel sharp in one moment, but it can vary and then maybe not feel as sharp in another moment. Things like someone's planning and organization can start to decline as well. And again, where folks might remember information if prompted, if cued and said like, we talked about this and this is what we did on this day. Do you remember? Like, oh yeah, I do remember. And then we did this and we did that, right? So it's kind of variable, but for folks then who have mixed dementias, oftentimes you can have these dual processes where it can just become amplified, right? And so the best things oftentimes are to do everything that we talked about on those last few slides, right? Diet and exercise, controlling those medical conditions, right? Ensuring that folks are in communication with their doctors, their cardiologists, right? Their PCPs, folks like that who can help manage those kinds of symptoms to reduce the impact of the vascular disease on the other neurodegenerative condition like Alzheimer's disease, if that's the case.
Wow. Thank you so very much
Sure.
for that. Are there any other questions before we move on to the next speaker? I think they are on overload, like their brain
Yeah,
are bust because it was very good and detailed information and just very helpful to uh
good.
to know so we can kind of look for those indicators if something is going on,
Absolutely.
and then, respond accordingly.
Absolutely.
Uh, so
Question
we are going to
for those proteins that you were saying that are missing. Is there any way that you can actually try to replace them or do something as far as whether it's food or medication to actually get that protein back? Or
Really good question,
Really
right?
good question.
Yeah, great question. Um, so that deserves there is a lot of research currently trying to see if there are medications that can help with Alzheimer's disease, help cure it, right? So we know that currently there is no cure for Alzheimer's disease. There are some medications that can help slow down the progression of Alzheimer's disease. And you all can talk with your doctors about what some of those look like. But there are common ones that are initially prescribed, things like what's called Aricept, is a common one that had previously that is often prescribed. What we know about that, though, is that typically it only reduces the impact for the first 6 months or so. That's what the literature has said, or that's what the literature has demonstrated so far, is that it kind of it can if it's helpful for folks, then oftentimes doctors will keep it on, will keep if let me rephrase that and say if it's not hurting someone and there are not significant side effects, their doctor will often keep them on it. But what we often see, at least in the research, is that there is typically kind of a point where it's not as helpful, and it's usually for the first 6 months that they're given that treatment that it's somewhat helpful. In terms of so a quick point here. So the misfolded proteins, what's actually happening is that there's too much of them. We don't want these misfolded proteins. So there are some medications that are trying to remove these misfolded proteins. That medication is still being studied. And so there are only clinical trials kind of at play with these at present. And so it's certainly something that you all can talk with your doctors about. And typically it's for a very prescribed, very narrow criteria who can kind of fit and meet criteria for getting that kind of medication. Typically, it's for people who are not advanced in their dementia. So people, if you catch it early, these are who these folks are for, or who this medication has typically been prescribed to at present. It's typically for people who don't have significant cerebrovascular disease in the brain, so those white matter changes we talked about. And it's typically, well, not typically, what currently one of the biggest challenges, I think, with it, there's two challenges. One is that it's very, very expensive in the realm of like tens of thousands of dollars. And second is that it really has not yet been studied on folks like us. It's really been very narrow in who has been given this medication, right? So it's oftentimes white individuals who are affluent, and it has not yet been studied on folks of color, Black folks in particular. And it's important that we participate in research and that we have access to participate in research so that we can know how these medications impact us, right? We don't want to know how it's only impacting one group. We want to know how it impacts us and multiple groups. And so, yeah, so those are kind of that's what the medication kind of looks like in Alzheimer's at present. Very
yeah,
good
I know. I know they are a lot of people now. A lot of my colleagues, and these are, of different ethnicities. They are using peptides that they're,
question.
experimenting with, and
Okay.
they also are expensive.
Yeah.
But they're, trying mixing one with another to get certain outcomes and to help, for as
Okay.
far as pains and aging and all the other type stuff. But there again, I don't know how many of us are actually trying to use some of these peptides to, help.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Certainly something to talk with your doctor about for folks who are caregivers and are interested for their loved ones, or for themselves, friends, those sorts of things. I always encourage my patients to talk with their prescribing doctors about these kinds of things. It's important.
Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, my name is Courtney. I'm going to first ask Felicia for permission to tell a story for a minute and a half, if she can time me, so that I won't. Just a quick little story. I put in there in the chat about having many years of experience with both of, Alzheimer's, dementia, or whatever. And first of all, it's, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, and I don't want to butcher it, but Miss Zolliecoffer.
Yes.
I'm so grateful to hear you say Alzheimer's, because I said if I hear one more person say Alzheimer's, it drives me batty. But I love that you said it correctly. It always drives me batty. I'm like, there's no time in there. But anyway, my grandmother, so really almost 40 years ago, at a family function around the holidays, my grandmother had come up to Chicago to visit, and it's a lot of us. That she has 9 siblings, and so it's a big family. And all the grandkids start coming downstairs saying, "Granny doesn't know who I am." I'm like, "What?" Nobody could figure it out. I won't go into the longer part of the story. The short part of the story is, so she stayed in town, and she would come for she would stay a month or two. So she was with her sister about the second or third week, and we went over to visit the great aunt and everything. And when we got over there, they all were laughing. They said, "Oh, doll is fine. She was just full of SH boot." We were like, "What?" They said, "No, she took a dump and now she's better."
Huh.
So she was not aware of who was who, where she was. And then they really thought that after she went to the toilet that she got better. This is 40 some years. So I'm leading up to a question. So it wasn't until many, many years later, and I shouldn't say many, many years, but a few years later, that they really got some, hold on what was going on with my grandmother, my first grandmother that was diagnosed. My second grandmother, my maternal grandmother, she ended up getting diagnosed with dementia. Of course, as you mentioned, I saw similarities between the two, but I saw some distinctions as well. The first grandmother that I mentioned got lost in Chicago in the blizzard cold, in her slip, left out the door, all those things that you talked about. Again, we didn't know what was going on. So my first question, because of what we didn't know and how long it took for them to start to figure it out, how long would you say they, and I want to just say in the Black community, but in general, but then if you want to add the Black community to it, that's fine too. How long would you say that we've gotten a better handle on being able to diagnose these things quicker? Because again, I'm talking about late 80s, early 90s, when my family was impacted by this. And when I say it was a quandary trying to figure out, because all of my grandparents' siblings lived into their 90s, sharp as a thumbtack as far as their mental faculties. I mean, don't forget nothing. And so to have one grandmother go through it and then another one on both sides, it's like wowing to me, which will lead to my second question. But I'll let you answer the first question first. How long you said that they've been better at recognizing it overall, and then, pulling it into the Black community?
Absolutely. Yeah, really great question. Thank you, Courtney, for sharing some of your own story and some of your family members' stories. So to answer your question, I actually think that we've gotten a lot better at early diagnosis for dementias in general, Alzheimer's disease in particular. I asked this question actually to some of my colleagues and say, are we seeing, my colleagues who have been there for 30 years at University of Chicago, are you seeing more cases of Alzheimer's disease in later stages, or are you seeing it in earlier stages? And their resounding answer is, we're seeing it in early stages because folks are coming in earlier now. We're seeing them more. They're more aware of the symptoms and what cognitive decline or cognitive changes can look like. It's a really good question that you pose in terms of within the Black community in particular. I think it's important for us to have these kinds of conversations, to continue to have these conversations so that folks are aware of the symptoms. I would agree, and I would say that Black folks in particular, folks of color in general, are also coming in at higher rates earlier, but we still want to catch people earlier, right? If there are cognitive changes, and so really it's important that we all do our part so that when we see our family members or our loved ones, we can start to talk about it in a productive way, instead of, maybe just over at grandma's house and saying like, I'm concerned about grandma, but no one doing anything, right? So now that we're aware of these kinds of symptoms, we can say, I'm concerned, and let me go with you to your next doctor's appointment so I can talk about some of this, in collaboration with you. We can talk about it as if this is, I said the anecdote earlier of like, my bones are starting to hurt more. Like, like an arthritis, right? As we go to the doctor for physical symptoms, we can go to the doctor for our cognition too, our cognitive changes too. So yes, we are seeing folks come in at earlier when there are earlier signs and symptoms.
So basically, my experience, our family's experience when we had that back then, again, talking about 35, 40 years ago, it wasn't so much unique to us. What you said, that was just kind of like the overall atmosphere of the disease, that people were going to the doctor repeatedly, getting, whether it's wrong diagnosis or just, I mean, because we were going regularly, just couldn't get anything that stuck and made sense.
100%. I think that there have been a lot of advances when it comes to Alzheimer's disease research in general and knowing an early diagnosis. We have lots of different tests now that help us, whereas previously we had to rely a lot of times on time and the history. And so what the patient and what the caregiver or family member is telling us, now we still rely on that oftentimes, but now we have lab tests and we have blood tests and we have MRIs that have become more advanced and help us catch this a lot earlier.
Okay, so that leads to part two, last question.
Mhm.
Now, since we do have this, is there any, and you may have mentioned this, but there was a time when my earbuds went out. Is there any correlation with the fact that I have two grandparents, both grandmothers, both sides, uh, to anything that may be going on, and whether it's my health, my siblings' health, or something that we should be concerned about family wise?
Great question. Yeah, it's a question I get a lot, right? So, is there a genetic component, basically, is the question to Alzheimer's disease, and should I be concerned about developing Alzheimer's disease in the future? So, Courtney, you shared that your grandmothers on both your maternal and paternal grandmothers have Alzheimer's disease. So, what I like to tell folks is that Alzheimer's disease in general, we really are thinking about it from late onset Alzheimer's disease as not being really genetically linked. And so by late onset, I mean anyone who is age 65 and older, if they develop Alzheimer's disease, that's considered late onset. Folks who develop Alzheimer's disease earlier than age 65, that would be considered early onset. So for people who are in their early 60s, so like 60, 61, right, to 64, or in their 50s and they develop Alzheimer's disease, that is more likely related to a genetic component of Alzheimer's. That is more genetically linked. Whereas if people are developing Alzheimer's at 65 or later, then it's less likely that they're going to pass on things like Alzheimer's disease, that they would pass on Alzheimer's disease to anyone else. Now, with that said, even if someone has early onset Alzheimer's disease, that is not a one-to-one, a guarantee 100% that that child or grandchild would go on to develop Alzheimer's disease. It just would increase the risk of developing it, but it's not a guarantee that you would go on to develop it or that anyone would go on to develop it if their grandparent, even if they were age 60 or younger, had Alzheimer's, even if their parent had Alzheimer's disease at age 60 to 64. It wouldn't necessarily mean that the child would go on to develop it too later on in life, but it would increase their risk of developing it. I hope that's clear.
I just want to say, before Courtney has a chance to, I don't know if she was going to respond, but what I'm hearing overwhelmingly is that we need to, now that we have access to this information, we just need to be more intentional about how we look at what's happening in ourselves. We don't just, blow it off as, oh, that's just getting older or this, that, and the third. We just become much more intentional about looking at what's really happening and then making sure we follow that up with uh, going to the doctor. And then if we still have some doubt or if there's still something that's saying this isn't normal, maybe insisting that we get those referrals. Because, if you have an HMO, they don't really like to do that. But if
Right,
you
right.
insist on it, they will.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, thank you, everyone. This is a really rich conversation. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next speaker, which is my new friend, Miss Timpo. I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce herself, just so that we can move the conversation along because we really want to get to that super ager, Mrs. Nicholes. So, uh, Miss Timpo, it's on you.
Yeah, hi everybody. My name is Phyllis Timpo. I'm the Director of Community Engagement, Outreach, and Recruitment at the Healthy Aging and Alzheimer's Research Care Center at the University of Chicago. So we are a research center that studies dementia and healthy aging. And as you kind of could gather from Chandler's talk, that dementia is a fairly new disease as far as research and what we understand about it. And so researchers are very kind of feverishly trying to find medications and cures and different things to help slow the progression of the disease or prevent people from getting the disease. But like she said, a lot of that research has been on white, highly educated people. And so the assumption is just that kind of try and see if it will work in our community. And so at the HAARC Center, we are very intentional about our research and making sure that our research includes everyone. And so that we know that the studies and the findings from our research can be applied to everyone and not just in a small community in hopes that it will filter out to more people. And so we study kind of the continuum of aging. We have studies for people with primary progressive aphasia in that FTD sphere that Chandler was speaking about, people with dementia or MCI. And then on the other side, we study people, superagers. So I can't remember. I think that was Sandra was speaking about her mother that or her family members that were 90 and very sharp. We study people like that. And we'll hear from Miss Sheila in a little bit about what it means to be a superager. But I think over time we found that there are people that aging, it does just because you're aging does not mean that you're going to get some kind of dementia. There are people that seem to be almost immune to dementia and they can be 80, 90s, 100s and have memory as good as somebody much younger than them. Our oldest superager is Miss Edith. She's 111 and me and Miss Sheila go and meet with her very regularly and she chats and tells us about things from 50, 60, 80 years ago and she still remembers. And so there are people that seem to be almost immune to these age-related cognitive declines that we often see in older adults. And so we are studying those people called superagers in the SuperAging Research Initiative to try to understand what might be the protective factors to Alzheimer's disease and dementia. What are they doing? What are their life? What are they eating? What are their social structures in their life look like that are kind of protecting their brains from these changes that Chandler talked about earlier. And so I will just say that I'm going to put some flyers in the chat. If you're interested in joining research, it's super important in our community because the early research has shown that Alzheimer's does look a little bit different in our populations. The genetic components are a little bit different. The pathways in our bodies are a little bit different. And so it's super important that we are in research. And so I put some information in the chat. I implore everyone to join our research registry as a way to get connected to research for you or someone that you're caring for, because that's really the only way that we're going to know that we are involved in the cure and not left behind in all these new findings for research. And so I'm going to give the floor to Miss Sheila, a good friend, and she's a research participant in SuperAging and just really a role model for me to just talk a little bit about what she does to protect her brain and be a superager and what it means to her to be a superager.
What don't I do? Thank you for having me this evening. Okay. Yes, I'm 80.
And I will say, Miss Sheila, if I can say your age, Miss Sheila is,
I was
she
just
just turned 85 and she spent her 85th birthday in Kenya.
Yeah, right. Thank you. Yes, I am. I also had my husband, he had vascular dementia. So I'm very well familiar with all the signs. And we used to play games on, sounds like and something like that. And then I also had an aunt who had Alzheimer's. So I know the signs of her, of that disease too. But in any case, I've always been intrigued about the brain. I've studied psychology. I always wondered why people do the things they do. And that's what just made me go into the field of psychology to get my degrees. But for myself, I just keep active. I stay away from negative people. I need to watch my diet more. I do have high blood pressure, and I don't have diabetes, but I have high blood pressure and high cholesterol. I don't like to take medication, so I don't take the full prescription. I always ask for the smallest, dosage, and then I take half of that. But I stay active. I'm super active. I do my exercise. I'm a photographer. I'm an artist. I go out and do speeches. I ministry at church. I'm on a ministry at church. I'm the program chair of my camera club. So it's 70 years old. We're 70 years old now, and we kept going consistently through COVID. So I was always thinking of activities every week for them to do. So it's just keeping active, doing the things that you enjoy doing. And I found that if you say something negative about yourself, like I am TIRED or whatever, you're telling your brain cells that, and it trickles down into your body, and you will be that, you know. And I'm always aware and try to be conscious of, not try to be, because you can't try to do anything, you either do it or don't. But I am aware of what I say, the words I use, because, it really affects your body. It affects your spirit. It just, your emotions, everything, And I have friends. I have one in particular, she made 80, and her daughter's telling her, "Oh, you're old, you're old." And every time I talked to her, she said, "Oh, I'm just old." I said, "You're not old, stop saying." So I had to really cut myself off from her, And another thing is that I was living in a retirement facility that I thought was active retirees. When I went there to see it, and my building had a fire 3 years ago. So I moved up there in that building, and oh Lord mercy, I couldn't wait to get up out of that building. Those people were so old, and I might have been older than a lot of people, but they were just so old thinking, old acting. I just could not take it, and that's just the way I am. I've always thought in my mind that I'm 5 years younger than what I am. I don't know where that came from, but that's what I feel. And when I was in my maybe 50s, 50s, I never thought about coming or being this age. And then when I got up to this age, I said, "Oh, dang," I didn't even know about SuperAging until they called me, because I was going to this memory program with my husband. And then I was, there all the time. And I started taking some tests and things, a memory test. And then they contacted me. I said, "SuperAging, what's that?" 80 and over. I said, "Oh, dang." Like I never thought about it. I never prepared for it. I would have put my facelift on and all worked early on my face and everything. But in any case, I get silly sometimes. But yes, it's just what you do, how you think, continue to do what you love doing, stay away from those negative people, exercise, eat healthy, try to eat healthy. I don't like drugs, so I do the natural thing mostly, as much as I can. And that's it in a nutshell, and I love going out talking about this because it's important, and people don't realize it. And I just love Miss Edith. She has just a lot of knowledge, and I look at my kids, they don't want to know anything I say, or they don't want anything about back in the day or nothing like that. I said, that's really unfortunate, because everybody else that I'm attracting wants to hear about it, so they're gone by the wayside, so to speak. But it's just that, just keep on moving forward, keep on being active, just watch what you eat, just do what you love doing, and stay around positive people. And I stay around young people. I don't know too many people that, I'm the oldest one, come to think of it, but I don't know too many people that are older than me that I really hang with. I think I'm the oldest one, but that's it.
Oh, wow. Can we just give some snaps and some claps? Oh my goodness. That was phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you.
Miss Phyllis, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, so our study is full of people like Miss Sheila who just are really so inspiring to be around, and it's really the most one of the most favorite parts of my job, just to be around so many inspiring people, um, like Miss Sheila. But I think that really shows the continuum that Alzheimer's disease and dementia is not a normal part of aging, and there are people and there are ways to kind of keep your brain healthy and active, like Miss Sheila said, to protect ourselves from Alzheimer's disease. And so, if you are seeing those symptoms that Chandler said, go to the doctor because it's not normal and it's possible to live into your 80s and 90s, 100, and, still be vacationing and have a very full and meaningful life.
Yeah, I plan on being here, 100 plus. I put it already out there, so Lord knows. And I love traveling. I'm preparing now. I went to Africa went this year, Greece last year, and this year I'm taking a long train ride. I'm going Chicago, New York, New York, New Orleans, LA, Portland, back to Chicago, all one group. And it's just I'm cool. Kids say, "Oh, you don't need to be doing that by yourself." I'm gonna do it, so get over it. So I'm not gonna let any kids or anybody hold me back. No, no, this is my life. And that's when I was taking care of my husband. I was really actually staying with him in the rehab and at the hospitals at night, overnight. And he said, "Honey, continue doing what you love doing." He knows that I'm going to take care of him, but just continue doing what you're doing and what you love doing. And that caretakers or care work givers, whatever it is, they should really understand that. Because anytime I hear about it that's taking care of some, their loved ones, I said, you got to take care of yourself first, because if you don't take care of yourself first, you're not going to be able to take care of anybody. They might be here long after you're gone, and you're giving your life to them. And if once they leave and they haven't, and they've given their lives to them, they're lost, because they've lost themselves, in caring for other people. So, I like to get that message out too. People that are caring for others, that you've got to take care of yourself and just continue doing it. Get some people out here to come in and, give you a couple of hours off or something, but take care of yourself too.
Let's see if I want to tap in and piggyback off you. First of all, I'm just so glad that even though I need to be in a bed, I got to get up in a little, I just couldn't not go listen to you. I had to be here for the SuperAging. But this is Courtney. I was talking earlier about coming from a family on both sides, 9 siblings. So like I said, on both sides, mom and dad's side, grandparents, a lot of them, all of them, SuperAgers, using that term, and those 2 grandmothers were the only one that ended up with dementia. So I saw a lot of Miss Sheilas in my family, and I could tell you, I love that you said about you didn't want to be around all those old folks. I think my dad was like that. Felicia knows my dad well, and my dad used to say it all the time. And he was like, "I'm not hanging with them." We were like, "But Daddy, they're your age." He said, "No, they're not. They got my number, but they ain't thinking like me." He said, "No, I'm lit. My daddy." My father died of pancreatic cancer. So he from day of diagnosis to death was 30 days. But that man lived, and Felicia knows this. That man lived to the minutes. You hear what I'm telling you? So and I had this conversation with Felicia too when she was dealing with some things with her dad and whatever. And people, and I said we got to also respect the fact that people, even if whether it's dementia or even if just someone's aging and physically can't do for themselves anymore, some people know what they want to do. You can't be around here telling people what they can't do, unless they really can't, because, somebody else has to do it for them. But I said, just to respect that. So I love that you told the people, you stand in your ground saying, no, I'm going to do it, because coming from an older family, I grew up with an older family. It was a lot of elders in our family for a long time. And we were raised to respect their wishes. And so I love that you are like, no, very calmly, I'm going to do it, and encouraging people to listen and make sure that people get to live. Because my husband's grandmother said when she was 90 something, she said, I'm the only one that's left my age. And she didn't feel like she had quality of life. And I said, just because you're taking care of somebody don't mean they have quality of life if they can't do what they want to do. So you get that trip, Miss Sheila, come and tell us how it works.
Right. They talk about they're in pain. Then, like I'm in pain. Sometimes I walk around here on numb feet. I keep on moving. Don't sit down. Don't sit down. When I was out recruiting for a university, we used to come in after the fall, and then that's when everybody come down with a cold, because we're on the move. The cold, the germs couldn't catch up with us, and that's the way I am now. I'm on the move. So that old stuff ain't gonna catch up with me.
Miss Sheila, I love your attitude and your outlook. I heard three things that, or actually four. You said talk to those brain cells. I love it. We've heard the power of positive confession in so many different ways, and I'm glad that that is becoming much more well versed in today's in, uh, just in today's times than it was in past. So yes, talk to those brain cells. I love it. And I loved how you described the impact of that on your body. Now, it's not just a spiritual thing. It is a physiological, evidence-proven thing that you can do to help improve your situation, your body, so forth and so on. You also said you trained yourself not to depend on medicine. I just can't say enough how big that is. They gave me a prescription for something, and as long as it wasn't pertinent to my living, and breathing, you said I'm not gonna take all of that. I'm gonna take what I need, and then I'm gonna quickly try to wean myself off. I love that. And then you say stay in youthful environments. Like I can't stand to be around anybody that is not moving in the direction that I'm moving in. And you're right, because even the Bible says that evil communication corrupts good manners. So if you hang around people that are anti this and I can't do that, you tend to take that on. And the last thing you said is continue to live. Even if you're in a situation where you're caring for someone else, you got to continue to live your life. Your life cannot just be all about one person or one situation. So thank you, Miss Sheila. I've gleaned so much from you, and thank you for doing what you do. And I look forward to hearing about you and even meeting you in person one day. So
Yeah,
thank you.
I'm going to attend this symposium tomorrow. It's all day. It's on what beats, brains, and balance over at DuSable Museum. It's all about the brain and the music, and anytime I see anything about the brain, I'm there. I just want to learn. Not that I know what I'm gonna do with it, but I just at least I get to know it. And a medication, sometimes medication, I may have a cabinet full of medication. I'll go ahead and get it. But I'm so sensitive to medication. I tell the doctors, I can't take it. I'm an alien. My body doesn't. You take one thing and it does this. So it causes other things. I can't tell your doctors, but that's what it is.
So thank you, Mrs. Nicholes. I appreciate you so much. So we're gonna move on to our resource network. We're just trying to always um, give information about what's out there and what you can do with it. I want to introduce to you Martha Rice. I came. Oh, okay. Thank
Okay,
you. Have a good
thank
night.
you.
Thank you for your contribution. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
So she is a wound care specialist, and if you are caregiving for someone, either and they're bedridden or they have to stay in one position for extended periods of time, there's the incidence of open wounds or bed sores, what they call them typically. So if that is happening, make sure that you are first, if you're in like a nursing home, make sure you have someone, make sure you're following up with that. We had an unfortunate incident with a loved one in our family where her bed sores almost killed her because they got infected. They weren't properly cleaned and taken care of. And over time, it went from bad to worse to almost fatal. So just here's her information. And if you want, you can take a screenshot. You can, or if you need me to forward some information, please just let me know and in the chat, and I will do that. Um, we have some other resources that I would love for Phyllis to tell us about.
Yeah, so if you would like to, next Saturday, the Walk to End Alzheimer's is at the Lincoln Park Zoo. And so we have a University of Chicago team. And so we'd love for people to join us if you want to walk for a family member, a loved one, a friend who has Alzheimer's disease. It's free to join. You don't have to fundraise if you don't want to, but really we're just walking to show our support. And so we'll put a flyer in the chat for that. And then if you are a caregiver, the University of Chicago has free art kits for caregivers and people living with dementia. And so you can go to the website. I will also put that in the chat. And just order a free art kit. Art is and creativity is really good for the brain. And so it's another way to kind of stimulate the brain and keep whatever functioning people with dementia may have and just keep it going. The brain is a muscle. And so the more you work it, the stronger it gets. And then at the Hall Library, if you are a Chicago resident, the library on 48th in Michigan, we have started memory kits. They're also family kits that you can use with your family. It contains different sensory items for people with dementia. There's a music and a nature one, and we are working to make a sports themed one that should be available later this year. And so usually they contain some kind of music, maybe some puzzles, some games that you can play with your family, some kind of art activity, some kind of sensory touch things, other ways just to stay engaged. People with dementia, even though, they may not remember or they may get in the later stages where they aren't able to speak, they still are capable of having love and connections with people in their family and loved ones. And memory kits are a great way to just keep that connection when you may not be able to communicate through words or different things like that. And so I will put all those in the chat, but they're really just wonderful resources. If you are a caregiver or know someone who's a caregiver, just to help keep active and engaged with people with dementia because that is so important.
Thank you so much for sharing that. We will continue to have that available in our digital network of resources as well. We're coming to a close, so I just want to briefly share with you some upcoming events. First, we're going to have another info session later in October about free legal resource. Free legal resources for anyone who has a significant disability or if they are considered a senior. The Center for Disability and Elder Law will be giving a presentation virtually on Thursday, October 23rd at 7 p.m. So if you're interested, please click on that QR code and register so I can send you out reminders and notifications of our upcoming event. Also, we have at the bottom of the page, you'll see information about our support group, and that happens once a month. You generally the second Thursday in the month, unless time and other things prevail on us to change it. But they always happen on a Thursday and at 7 p.m. And for now they're all virtual sessions as well. And then I just want to let you know that I was invited to be on a podcast. The young lady I told you about a little bit ago, Martha Rice, who's the wound care specialist, she's also a relationship coach and has a podcast called Casting the Net. So she invited me a few weeks ago to speak on on providing tools that restore autonomy for cognitive care. And I have a link that I will put in the chat, or you can just let me know if you want to listen to it and I will provide it to you. That leads us to our final remarks. I just want to say this quote out loud. Age is no barrier. It's a limitation you put on your mind. And I can tell you, everything that we've heard tonight has reinforced this quote. I didn't know all of what was going to be shared, but I am just so glad that God led me to this quote because it just really kind of perfectly caps off everything that we've heard tonight. So with that, I just want to thank you guys. Thank you, thank you, thank you. We did go a little bit over, but that's okay because all the information was worth it. And I hope that you join us again next month and send us your ideas, send us your needs, anything that you are looking to help you on the journey of caregiving or just in cognitive care. Please consider Seed2Fruit Education as a resource. Our contact information and social media is right there. And with that, I bid you adieu and thank you for joining us today. And have a blessed evening. Oh, I'm sorry. Let's just quickly close out in prayer, Ricardo.
Father, in the name of Jesus, we just thank you for all the information that was shared tonight, Father. We just thank you, Father, that we had open minds and open hearts to receive the information, Father, and to go out, Father, and let other people know about this information, Father, so we can grow as a community. So all these things, we just thank you for it in Jesus' mighty name. Amen.
Amen. So thank you again for joining us. I'm turning off the recording now.